Welcome to Iron Butterfly Podcast. My name is Megan Jaffer.
And I'm Katie Hopkins, and we'll be your hosts.
We created Iron Butterfly Podcast in honor of Eloise Page, the original Iron Butterfly. Our podcast continues her legacy, inviting the unsung heroines of the United States intelligence community to share their stories with aspiring leaders like you. Hi, I'm Megan Jaffer, and I am thrilled to welcome you to Season 8 of Iron Butterfly Podcast. We have an awesome season full of incredible stories, amazing women, and memorable moments that we hope leave you coming back for more. For Season 8 premiere with Katrina Mulligan, we're doing something a little different. Instead of one episode, we're splitting this conversation into two parts because it's just that good. A little bit about our guest today. Katrina is the national security lead at OpenAI. Some of her favorite past jobs have included being Barack Obama's paralegal before he ran for the Senate, working on GTMO policy at ODNI, and being chief of staff to the first female secretary of the Army. The job she never wants to have again is managing the response to the Snowden disclosures from the White House. Her 10-year-old describes her as skibbity and mid. She doesn't know what that means, and I don't either. She laughed heartedly at our question about her hobbies because she hasn't had free time since 1998. But when she is not working, she cooks competitively and does open source analysis on Taylor Swift. A fun fact about Katrina is that she once auditioned to be a backup dancer for Janet Jackson. So needless to say, you won't want to miss this. We also want to give a very, very special shout out and a massive thank you to our sponsor of our two-part Season 8 premiere, Blue Halo. Blue Halo is a returning sponsor to Iron Butterfly Podcast, and we've been fortunate to have their incredible support over the years. For those who don't know Blue Halo, you should. We've watched them grow significantly over the last several years, in large part due to their amazing workforce. To learn more about them, you can visit us on Iron Butterfly Podcast's social media page. So buckle up, because it's going to be a wild ride. And most importantly, Katrina, welcome to Iron Butterfly.
Hey, Katrina. It's so great to have you. Thank you so much for saying yes to this. We're really excited to have you on.
We are super excited. It's good to see you. For our audience, I don't think I've seen you in 15 years or
it's been a while,
a long time.
That ages us both.
I know. Yeah, I know. Maybe we shouldn't have said that.
You're both 29, so I don't know how that math works out.
Yeah. I went actually and got my yearly exam today, and I still have 20/20 vision.
Oh, good for you.
I know.
I have fully gone the way of reading glasses, so that's like a new
No shame.
Totally. I also feel like when you start wearing reading glasses, it makes you feel like a reader.
Yeah. I do like having glasses. As somebody I've always had 20/20 vision, so I never had glasses or contacts, and now I'm like, well, this is a new accessory.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
For sure. You could get all different colors and shapes.
Yeah, I had those blue light glasses for a week or whatever.
Yeah,
when they were popular,
everybody did,
and I was like, I am the coolest and smartest person on the entire planet. Yeah. Basically,
it's so weird. Yeah. So we're gonna kind of start off kind of fun. I thought about this the other day, and I ran it past Cadie. I'm like, I think this should be the first question we ask people from now on, and because I think it'll be different for every single person. So, did you drive here today?
Yes.
And if you did, what did you listen to? What was the last thing you listened to on the way here?
100% Taylor Swift.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, not even. That was anyone who knows me or follows me on any social media would have gotten that question.
Okay, so let's talk about Taylor Swift for a second. So what album captures your state of mind at the moment?
Oh, definitely Tortured Poets Department, which is what I was listening to on the way here. But it's like a little melancholy, a little angsty, a couple angry moments. I feel all of those things.
I love that. Okay, and if you had a Katrina Mulligan Eras tour, what albums would be when in your life?
Oh, God, wow. Oh, that's a question. I could spend a couple of days thinking about that. Like, I don't even know. I guess oh God, that like, I honestly am flummoxed by that question because the amount that I think about Taylor Swift and its application to my life is so intense that it would require an AI algorithm to like sort that out.
Okay.
That's a good answer.
We'll follow up.
Yeah.
We'll follow up.
I could go very deep in that space. I don't know if we have time for that.
So this is the first time we've ever asked. We started this way, and you have proved that we are going to start every episode this way. That was a great start.
Yes. Awesome.
So we normally start the same way, where we just want to learn a little bit about who you are and where you came from. So, and kind of how you ended up in the national security space. So tell us where you grew up and how you what you majored in and what your interests were.
So prepare to be surprised.
All right.
Okay. So I grew up in Elk Grove, California on the south side of Sacramento in a housing project. And I am the first person in my family to graduate from high school. And in fact, the only person in my family who graduated from high school proper. So I went to the University of Chicago for undergrad, which I applied to because I got a brochure in the mail that you used to get after you took the PSAT or whatever. And the campus looked like a castle. And 16-year-old Katrina really cared about that. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. Like my, University of Chicago has this like life of the mind tagline. And it really kind of was that. I started college at 17 because I was a year, younger than my age level was. And so had just kind of a different experience, but the fact that University of Chicago was so small really played to my strengths. And then, I got to be like a nerd in this way that was really productive. And I also like got to figure out how to be social, when you're younger than everyone. It really matters.
I would say, because I'm from Chicago and went to college in Chicago, not the University of Chicago, which for our listeners is very hard to get into in undergrad. And I would say it's a culture of, it's a good thing to be a nerd at the University of Chicago.
It totally is.
It was like celebrated.
It was totally celebrated. And so I got to like invest in my inner nerd in a way that I might have tried to like suffocate my inner nerd if I had gone to like a cool kid school or something. But I think, in hindsight, it was truly amazing. And then, one of the cool things that came out of that, which endures to this day, is a network of like super kick-ass women. My friends, I like to say, and this is fairly true, that I am the least successful person of all of my friends from the University of Chicago. Like, executive vice president for Amex, professor of cancer epidemiology, like finding the cure for cancer, like the women that I came out of University of Chicago, who are still in my life, who are in my wedding, like it's been really fun to get to root for other people who are in totally different fields doing really amazing work, and they think the work I'm doing is so amazing, and so we all just sit around being amazed by each other.
That's the best
kind of friends.
Yeah, it's really great.
That's the best.
Yeah.
And how do you think that your upbringing and being the first in your family to graduate from high school, like how did that shape your sort of perspective or like your unique viewpoints, like in this University of Chicago like ecosystem where like I don't know how rare that was, but I imagine relatively rare. Like
yeah. I mean, one thing that I think about a lot is in some ways being like in a very low socioeconomic status it has some similarities to what it's like being a minority in other contexts where people make assumptions about you based on how you present that are just incorrect. And so for me, a lot of times it's that people assume that like I must have come from a upper middle class family and had parents who, were professionals or whatever because I look or sound or present in a way that they associate with that.
Yeah.
And in reality, like, I was a kid who like, my idea of being a rich person was being able to buy concessions at the movie theater. Because if you are a poor person, one common thing that like somebody out there that's listening to this is going to be like, I know exactly what she's talking about. Because when you grow up poor and you really are poor, like you have never gotten popcorn or a soda at the movies. And like I remember, even to this day, as a grown professional adult in my 40s, I will go to the movie theater and slide that credit card right over, and I'm like, I will take a large fountain soda, and I'm just like, I have arrived. Like, I have made it. This is a sign of my success.
Also, though, the movie theater sodas, nothing compares.
No, they are actually significantly better, but it's weird to me that even all these years later, I still think about those things, and those are common experiences that a lot of people don't share in common. But when I when I connect with people who have a shared background, growing up the way that I did, it's actually something that we will talk about and be like, I see you. Yeah. I know that you had that experience.
So it's something I struggle with a lot, and I wonder how you have navigated. So I didn't grow up with money either. And I find that now, so I have those moments where I'm like, even when I have like my Starbucks in the morning.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a total luxury.
And I feel like and I'm a woman in my 40s too, that I still struggle with like that person that I grew up as and kind of feeling a little bit of guilt of what I have now.
Yeah, yeah.
And even today, when I go back home and someone will say, oh, it must be nice living out there in DC and,
yeah,
driving a new car and going on vacations. And I feel like them because those are the people I grew up with, but I'm also this person. And so
yeah. It is. Well, I think many people can relate, whether it's socioeconomically or educationally or in other ways. Like the distance between where you came from and where you are is like a pretty, I think, something that we all navigate, and like the bridges that you have to build between the two to make them work. I mean, I can totally relate. But like I also, it is. I once had this experience. This was a few years back where two really cool things happened where the worlds crossed. And one was I went back to my high school and I gave like a talk to these students that were basically in a Head Start like program. But it was for high school. It was like high school students. It's a program, I think it's called AVID, where, they find kids that are kind of on the cusp and they really invest in them to try to get them, college ready and reach their full potential. And I went to go talk to those students about, this was when I was working at the White House. And so it was like, to them, it was like a big deal because this person works at the White House. And I got back to my high school and realized that there are like literally people had pictures of me in their classroom, like old teachers that I used to have, like, something that I would like post it on LinkedIn or on Facebook or something, goodness. Like a high school teacher and was like, this is somebody who came from here and you can do this too kind of thing. Wow. And it blew my mind. And I was like, whoa, that felt heavy, but also like really kind of like, wow, okay, maybe I'm doing okay. Like, maybe I can finally start feeling good about myself. I don't know.
I know there's a shrine of me in my high school, but
the other thing that happened that was so cool is that one day I posted, I don't even remember, it was something on Facebook, and my high school history teacher posted in response. It was something about like the day that I had at the White House, and she said something like, oh my God, it's so incredible that, I've always wanted to go there or something. And I was like, wait a minute. You can totally come here, like come here. And so I wrote back, I was like, no, seriously, like I would be delighted to like have you come. And so she flew to DC.
That's amazing.
And I took her to the White House and she got to see, she like, we did the whole West Wing tour and everything. And like every year, once a year, she reposts the post, picture. The like time that she went to the White House and retells the story about how she got to go there. And it's like joy. It just sparks joy.
That's
that's a great story.
Katie Laubacher.
What's her name?
Katie Laubacher. She's like amazing, and the amount of like pride. I mean, she almost cried like seeing. She saw. I can't remember who was press secretary at the time, but whoever it was that was press secretary was like leaving the room, and she was like acted like she had seen a Kardashian. You know, it was like the celebrity of her life. Oh, it was so great.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
That really is. That's a great story.
Okay, so we totally sidetracked. So let's get back to, okay, you are at University of Chicago. What did you major in, and then what was next?
Okay. We had a weird, funky major called Law, Letters, and Society, which I think is just basically like University of Chicago trying to be
fancy.
It was like poli-sci law. You know, I was like pre-law. I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. And in fact, not only was I going to be a lawyer, wait for it, you guys, because this was like from the time I was about like 7, I want to say. I was a kid who really craved adult attention and adult positive attention. I was like, you know, firstborn in the birth order, all the things. And I figured out that I didn't even really know what this job was, but if I told people that I wanted to be a Supreme Court justice, they would have the reaction that you just had. You can't see her face, but she just made the face like, that every adult has when a 7-year-old.
This is so real now.
Tells them that you want to be a Supreme Court justice. I have no idea how I figured this out. But I didn't even really know what it was, but I started saying it, and adults always had the same reaction, and I loved it, and it gave me this, like, boost, and so I just kept saying it, and then I started believing it. And so at this point where I'm, like, in high school, like, if you look at my high school yearbooks and what people said, I hope to see you on the Supreme Court, or I hope you make it to be a Supreme Court justice. And so I just, in a weird way, like, I started faking it till you make it when I was, like,
7.
I was like, I'm just going for it. But I am telling you, this is so true. I don't remember the last time I've even thought about this, let alone said it out loud. I made decisions in my teens and early 20s based on this goal that I had that, like, I didn't even really understand. I didn't drink at parties because I thought it would impede my ability to become a Supreme Court justice. I didn't do drugs in college because I thought it would impede my ability to become a Supreme Court justice. And it was like, it gave me a reason to make a different choice that I often have wondered, like, if I hadn't genuinely been like, this is a thing that I'm going to do, would I have chosen different things that maybe would have made some of the other things I've attained more difficult? Like, probably. I don't know. But, you know, at some point I realized that, and we can get into this, it was probably when I was in law school, that, like, I didn't actually like the law that much, and being a Supreme Court justice was totally not in the cards for me. And, you know, and I had other epiphanies along the way that were, but it was, that went all the way through college, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It is so cool. It's like proof that it doesn't really matter what your goal is at the time. Like, if you're pointed at the wrong thing, as long as you're just, like, pointed in a general direction.
I think that's
right. It kind of, like, you end up wherever you're supposed to end up, but it's, like, having the direction and having, like, something that you're looking towards, like a North Star, is important because it, like, pulls you forward.
And you don't actually have to believe it in the beginning. That's the other thing, because, like, 7-year-old Katrina did not believe, she didn't know what a Supreme Court justice was from Adam, but by the time 14-year-old Katrina was rolling around, like, she believed that she was going to be a Supreme Court justice, and she made sure everybody else believed it too. And, like, there's something that you can actually start out in a place where you have a lot of doubt, or you're not totally sure that that's the thing, and it can still drive you in a really good direction, I think.
Totally. Okay, so you are at law school. You're like, not going to be a lawyer.
Where did you go to law school?
Well, so we skipped a really important part, which is that I graduate from undergrad, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. And this is actually a funny story because everybody at the University of Chicago is, like, into econ. That's the big major.
Yes.
And then everybody gets funneled into either consulting or investment banks. That's, like, what the machine produces. So, of course, like, I'm a sheep at this point in my life. And so everybody else is doing a thing, so I'm going to do it. So I, like, go interview at, I think, Anderson Consulting or McKinsey. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. And I go, you know, I get the first round interview. I did really well in college. So, like, you know, you go to the career center, you put in the thing, and they give you an interview, and I get through the first round fine. And then I get to this second round, and they have all of us come to this on-site, like, interview thing where there's a bunch of students, like, I knew, who were all interviewing on the same day. And we get to this part where they, like, I didn't know it at the time, but basically you're in the final round and you're sitting down with the decision maker, you know? And the guy asks me, what's the headline of your life? Like 10 years from now, like, what does the headline say? And I didn't realize. I didn't say that, actually, no. That would have been funny. That actually would have played better than what I actually said, which was that I've had a family. And that was the wrong answer. And I left this room and I knew at the moment that it didn't work. And then I got in the elevator and some of the other people in the elevator had like big manila envelopes and I didn't have one. And I knew that I didn't get the job. And I felt
How did he react to you?
He was just like, I saw it in his face. Like, it was like, yeah, no, we're looking for the people who are here being like, version of I want to be a Supreme Court justice, but like for corporate America, I want to make rich companies richer, you know?
Yeah.
And I just was like, I didn't really have a sense of what question he was really asking or how I should answer it. But to be fair, like, that was probably maybe my first job interview ever.
Well, and you were being honest.
And I was just sort of like, well, if you're asking me where I want to be 10 years from now, like, I would like to have a family, you know?
Yeah.
And it was a pivotal, you know, it actually caused me to become a much better interviewer because I realized that, like, I need to think about this in a more strategic way and differently than I had been. But, like, I felt really disappointed, but it was not because I thought, like, I really want to work at McKinsey or wherever it was and I didn't get this chance. It was more like everybody else did a thing and some people did that thing better than me. But, like, I didn't think about that too long. Don't feel sad. Because the job that I ended up getting, this was, like, in ye olden times when you had to look for job postings in the newspaper. Yes.
Were you in Chicago still?
I was.
Okay.
So I'm in Chicago. I had a little summer job arranging, like, orientation. I was, like, help them figure out their orientation program. And then I used that summer to apply for jobs. And I see this job because I, of course, wanted to be a Supreme Court justice, to be a paralegal at a small civil rights law firm in Chicago. And that is where I became Barack Obama's paralegal.
Crazy.
Straight out of college. The most bizarre twist of events.
Okay, so tell us about the first time you met Barack Obama.
Oh, the first time. God, I actually don't remember the first time. Like, he just was in, we were in this brownstone in Chicago, and there were, like, I want to say, like, maybe nine attorneys and 3 paralegals in this brownstone. And there was, like, these rooms that used to be bedrooms. Like, this was that were offices, and then we had, like, one lady that was the lady at the front desk. And that was, like, it, And so, I get the job. It was probably a couple weeks before I first met Obama when I got there because he was of counsel to the firm. He wasn't there all the time. He was teaching. He was a state senator at the time. And so I was helping to administer large class action lawsuits that were, where, people had won settlements. And a lot of them were Spanish speaking. And how I got the job is I spoke enough Spanish from, like, high school and college to be able to, like, have a conversation and part of the interview in Spanish. And so, anyway, what I do remember is that there came a point where I wanted to get involved in local politics, and just because I was interested in I've always been interested in government and governance and things like that. And I was mentioning it to one of our fellow paralegals, and he's like, well, Barack Obama is a state senator, and I think he might run for office again because he had already had a failed congressional campaign, and he might run for Senate. You should talk to him. So I was like, okay. So Barack and I, because this is how long ago this was, we went to the Whole Foods that's like right there in River North. Like, you probably know this Whole Foods. And because, like, how they have the, you get the hot food bar or whatever, and you can sit at the Whole Foods. You didn't want to bring the food back to the brownstone where we're all in close quarters. So you go to the Whole Foods, you get the hot bar, and you sit at the table. And that's what we did. And we talked about, like, what his plans were and what my plans were. And he was like, and then he asked me, like, a bunch of weird questions, like, are there any, like, embarrassing things about your background that I should be concerned about? And I was like, no, not really. And then he was like, well, would you consider being the first hire for my Senate campaign? And I was like, I don't know. I need to call my mom.
Oh my God.
And so I took 24 hours and I called my mom.
You're like, hold, please.
Yeah. He was like, I can pay you for 3 months. And I don't know for sure if I'm running, because at the time he was deciding, there was this big issue of whether Carol Mosley Braun was going to run. It's like a million years ago. Names that probably don't mean a lot to people now. But he wasn't sure he was going to run, but he was going to do the exploratory phase of it. And he's like, I can pay you for 3 months. And the first thing I did in that job, I did say yes. And I negotiated. You guys wait for this. This is like really juicy information. I've never really told anybody. I was concerned about healthcare. He had healthcare through his job, and there's one other person who was the office manager who had healthcare from her husband, and I was single, and so like I wasn't going to have healthcare if I left the firm.
Yeah,
and nobody else needed healthcare, and so I said I needed healthcare, and he paid for my healthcare premiums out of his personal checking account the entire time that I worked for him. It's true. It's a true story.
That's amazing.
Isn't that wild?
That is wild.
It is wild. He literally, like, with a check from, like, Barack and Michelle at the top, you know? Like, he paid for my health care.
You were,
premiums.
like, patient zero of
Obamacare. I know. Little did we know. But listen, I can vouch for the fact that the guy cares about healthcare.
No, honestly,
he actually cares
that's
about
why the
healthcare.
story's so cool.
It was
it's
really
like walking
cool.
the walk.
Yeah. So the first thing I did is I bought the domain name BarackObama.com for like $15 on GoDaddy.
No
Yeah.
way.
Isn't that wild? Anyway, it's fun to talk about. I haven't thought about this.
You
like
need to write a book.
Honestly.
No, I don't need to write a book. We're not even, too many people are writing books.
We have so much career left. It's like not even.
No, we're not even like we're not. I know.
Okay, I'm like, we will not go this
this is
amazing.
This is amazing.
So Obama goes to the Senate. I go to law school because, again, I was going to be a Supreme Court justice. And I was like, I'll see you after law school because, like, I can't let your Senate race, you know, get in the way of my life. And so I go to law school at UCLA. I go there.
Did?
Yes, I go there because I got in-state tuition, and it was that or Columbia, and Columbia was like more than twice as expensive at the time. It turned out that like UCLA got a lot more expensive during the years that I was there, so I didn't really save the money that I thought I was going to. But I get to UCLA and two things become true. One, I've discovered that I do not love the law, and I have a crisis because like all of my identity up till that point is like wrapped up in the law being like what I'm going to do. And what I realize is something that may save a lot of people who are listening to this podcast a lot of angst, which is that there is an animating question in my life that is really important, and it's different than what lawyers do. What lawyers do is answer the question, what can we do? And the question I like is what should we do? And they are not the same thing. Yeah. And they have different implications for what types of careers are the best fit for you. And I later in marrying my husband learned my husband is a brilliant lawyer. He's a better lawyer than I would ever have been, even if I devoted my whole self to it, because he loves the question, what can we do? He thinks that the part of me that's like, these are stupid rules. We should have different rules. Let's come up with something different. He's like, why are you spending all this time like fighting the way things are? And I'm like, because I love policy. And if you love law, I mean, some people fall in between the two, right? Yeah. Like it's a spectrum. It's not either or binary. But for me, I'm really far on the policymaking side of that equation. And it meant that law school was really frustrating for me. I would see an exam. I mean, I remember one exam in particular where I fought the exam because the whole point of the exam was to expose how the way the law would apply in this context was actually really annoying and nobody likes it. But they wanted us to wrestle with that. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't say what the law actually said. I just had to go into the way that this can't be the way it is. Yeah. Because this way is bad. Right. And I fought the exam and it was the worst grade. I got a C on this.
That's like failing.
Which is really bad at law school on this exam because I just couldn't. And so the whole experience for me of being in law school was like having rocks in my pockets. It felt like everything was heavier and harder than anything had ever been. I didn't like it. And so I did something really smart, which is I left law school. I didn't quit law school.
That is actually really smart, though.
I figured out that what I needed to do was do something nobody else was doing, because part of it was the comparison of everybody else against me was like really grating. And I wasn't faring particularly well in it. But two, I was like, how do I make lemonade? How do I make lemonade? I don't like what I'm doing. I found a professor who was willing to like argue for me to be able to do an externship. They did all these externships, like you could go work for a judge for a semester and they would give you credit, or you could go work in a clinic and they would give you credit. And I was like, what if I go to Iraq and work on the war? Can I get credit for that? And they were like, no, we've never done that before. And I was like, well, what if...
That's insane.
So...
all the things that you could have
I know. That's not what I thought you were going to say.
So fast forward, I figure out that going to Iraq was actually going to be much harder than I thought. So I went to Jordan and I got the American Bar Association to allow me to come over and work on Iraq human rights programs as part of this American Bar Association program where they did rule of law, sort of evangelizing in countries that needed it. And at the time, Iraq had just, put in place a new constitution, and the idea of constitutional supremacy was still very, new to them. And so, the American Bar Association was doing this, programming to help them teach judges how to think about the role that they have and how to apply a constitution, in a setting where before that, if the law conflicted with what Saddam Hussein wanted, you just did what Saddam Hussein wanted,
Yeah.
And it was amazing. And so I got them to say yes. It was the first time they had ever done anything like it at the school. And I went to Jordan by myself for 7 months or whatever it was. And it was an absolutely magical experience that changed the trajectory of my career, because I figured out, I don't actually have to be good at law. It's not the end of the world, and there is something else productive and that brings me joy, and is meaningful, that I can do with this credential that I've just spent $200,000 on. And so we get to the end of law school, and I had at that point. So this is where the story gets tricky. So I am in my 3L year. Obama runs for president, and I email him because I created the email account.
Obama.com.
Yeah. His email address, by the way, I will tell you because it's no longer an active email address, was Barack@BarackObama.com. And mine was Katrina@BarackObama.com. And so I wrote to him and said, I think you might actually run for president. And if you do, I want to be, involved in it. And he wrote me back and looped in David Axelrod and all these people and David Plouffe and said Katrina, we would love to have you, blah, blah, blah. And so that's how I ended up on the Obama campaign. I left for Iowa the day after I graduated from law school. And I was on the traveling team for, I don't know, however many months it was from the summer until Iowa. And I was in New Hampshire. And then the day after New Hampshire, when we really realized that Obama was this wasn't going to be a flash in the pan thing,
Yeah.
which was really Iowa was the real moment. They decided that we had to stand up a traveling press corps, and we didn't have one, and nobody had ever done it on the campaign before. So all of a sudden, I got a desk and a computer at headquarters, and they were
in Chicago?
In Chicago.
So we have to pause because this is hilarious. So I volunteered almost every day in Chicago.
Wow.
So I was in Chicago at that time. I think I was living at home because I had just gotten back from Korea. Went to graduate school in Korea, and I would take the train in, and I would get off, and it was right around the corner. And you guys, well, I'm going to say you guys, but the campaign used to have, my husband calls it Obama Camp, but what it was,
yeah, I remember Obama Camp.
Yes, so I went to Obama Camp and it was how to
field organize.
Yes,
sort of,
field organize. And my husband always jokes about that. And
respect, empower, include.
Yes, that's so. I just all this is wild to me because I'm sure. I mean, I met you much later, but I'm sure we crossed paths, which is just wild. Okay, sorry.
That's wild. So I stand up the traveling press corps, try to figure out how do you bill the press for their share of seats on a chartered plane and all this kind of stuff. And like, it was crazy. And, you know, I met my husband during that time, and he was just like a random law student in Chicago at the time. And he wasn't involved in the campaign at all. And I kind of needed that separation because campaign life's really intense. And, you know, I remember I worked 125 days without a day off. Like not a Saturday, not a Sunday, like every day. It was exhausting and grueling. And then you'll appreciate this part of the story because then I decided, oh my God, this guy is going to win this election. And I still haven't taken the bar. And so, because when I say I got on a plane the day after I graduated, I actually did. I didn't take the bar when everybody else did. I just went. And I was like, I thought like, okay, you know, maybe he's going to like, you know, this Iowa thing doesn't seem so likely. I'll do this for a few months. It'll be a cool experience.
Then I'll take
the bar in February. It'll be fine. And then it's like, nope, that's not happening. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute. The July bar is only offered twice a year. Mm-hmm. Like the July bar is my only chance to take the bar until like he may win this thing, and then I may have these opportunities I'll never have again, and I will literally not have the one credential that I actually need to be able to practice law.
Oh my God.
And so I was like, okay, so I took a leave of absence from the campaign during the long slog of like April to July when like the Hillary, you know, like remember when we all knew that Hillary wasn't going to make it, but like she still kept going like that time. Yeah. And so I went and just like studied for the bar, and then the craziest thing happened. This was, wait for it.
I'm so invested in this right now. I feel like I'm watching a show.
I'm at the edge of my seat.
Like this.
If people are listening on Spotify or something, and you can't see us, I'm like, no, oh, like, what's that?
Closer and closer and closer.
Oh, God. So, hi, it's Megan again from Iron Butterfly Podcast. That's it for part 1 of Katrina's episode. So stay tuned. Our conversation continues in 2 weeks. You won't want to miss it.